And then I realized how I don't know anything about veterinary business. I know how to treat pets, I know how to do surgery, I can remove spleen in 40 seconds, but I can't run the business.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare, and our guest is Dr. Ivan Zak. He's CEO and founder of Galaxy Vet's healthcare systems. He's also the podcast host of Veterinary Innovation Podcast and a podcast called Consolidate That. So, Galaxy Vets is a consolidation group. They just started in August, and they already have 10 locations under LOI. So, it's a very promising start. Their future looks exciting. And Dr. Ivan, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So yeah, you are, I think, the first guest that I've had that was born in the Ukraine. So that is a super interesting little tidbit right there. I know you're born in the Ukraine, raised over there. Essentially, you didn't come over to Canada until you were 20 years old. So I mean, that's got to be crazy. Like, what was life like in the Ukraine? I always love finding out people who are from different countries.
Well, it was post so I moved here in 2002, and it was sort of post 90s. And 90s, if anybody ever was interested what was going on in post Soviet Union environment, it was pretty bad because Soviet Union broke in like 1991. It was over, and then the first 10 years of that was a very high criminal driven sort of government. There's like no government, and it was pretty bad. That was the decision to move because it was not regulated. It was, you probably have seen in North America crazy lines in the stores. There's, in order to get milk, I remember when I was like 6, to get milk just for the family, you actually physically had to, because they were giving 1 liter of milk per person, and you had to be in line to get that. So I was 6, and my grandmother had to bring me with her to get that. So it was rough. And moving to North America, it was sort of not, people are saying, well, why Canada? And I usually say it was not where, it was from where. We needed to go from there, and we didn't care where to go. So.
Mm. Wow. Man, yeah, that's crazy. And so I think I've never heard that before. So that, I mean, obviously, when you had the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was like the whole house of cards around communism fell down. But I think we kind of gloss over the fact that it took 10 years to stabilize. So at the time, I mean, were you thinking that you had it better off under the Soviet Union, during that tumultuous period?
Well, if you ask, maybe my parents' generation, some of them think that it was, but I think it's more related to their sort of nostalgia towards their younger years. I think getting rid of Soviet Union and communism in general is a good thing. It doesn't mean that they immediately after that everything is incredible. And right now it's still very rough political situation, and plus the neighbor like Russia who decided to invade. Like it's not very good there. But I think that any move away from communism is good regardless.
Yeah, yeah. And so, why do you think that there's so much talk about communism right now? Like, okay, let me ask you a question before that. What do you think is the difference between communism and socialism?
Well, I think that we're getting political here. I'm trying to stay away from political, but I think that socialism, like so I live in Canada, and I think that there's more socialism here than in, let's say in
Hmm.
US. We have a lot of aspects that support the society, like social medicine. It's taken from taxes, and then we have medicine that is available to all. But if you think about communism, the whole thing was with, Marx and Lenin. They wanted to take everything from the rich and then distribute it equally, and then have the equality of outcomes, it's a very good idea in theory, and a lot of people are pushing the equality these days. But I think that equality of opportunity is important. But
You're
if you
saying
try to
people are pushing
equalize,
equality of outcome these days, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like standard. They did experiments with low level income, I think, to all somewhere in Europe. I think in Switzerland or somewhere, or in Sweden. And what happens? The Soviet Union happens, and we've seen it. It's been 85-year experiment. So don't go there. This is not a good idea. And when you try to equalize outcome, then everybody stops trying hard. A couple of people that are, but regardless how hard they try, if it's an equal outcome, why would you be striving for it? So I think that the whole background of success of North America is on capitalism and on having a competition. And if you work harder, you get more. So I think that that's important.
Yeah.
And that's, it's a basic evolutionary
I
process.
mean, it seems so commonsensical, right? Like, how can you possibly have equality of outcome? I mean, it's crazy that that's even a topic. Like, it's an impossibility. You'll never get equality of effort ever. Everybody always puts in different effort, and I mean, it's just like, have you ever watched a sports game, right? Like, people like having different results, right? Like, they like seeing who the champion is, and people like having the opportunity to go improve themselves. And so it's just like, I'm just blown away that people have even, and I know we're getting sidetracked here from our additional thing, but you've got such unique perspective in this that I think it's important to share. And so it's just like, like you said, we have a 75-year case study in Russia on what happens when you try and create an opportunity of outcome, or even like, and level the playing field. If you're leveling the opportunity, that's fine, but not leveling the outcome. And so, like, we've got a lot of people that say, well, there shouldn't be billionaires, or there shouldn't be people who have this much more than other people. And so you just get into this comparison game, and it's like, why do you care how much other people have, right? Like, as long as you, and there's some people that will even say, like, yeah, if I would rather us have a lower quality of life all around, but all be equal, than to allow people to be so much wealthier than others. And I mean, you've seen it. Like, you've been there and you've seen it, and you see the. So I guess, like, my question is, like, do you think that there's any validity to that thinking, or, like, what do you think the answer is?
Again, I think it's getting political, but the way it's there's a couple aspects to it. I think that how do you start the process? So the way it was started in Russia, again, everybody forgets what it was like, but basically the revolution in 1917, the Communism Party came and they basically destroyed everybody with
Hmm.
wealth and then distributed it among people that didn't have wealth. Well, what they did with that, they also killed a bunch of people along the way. They basically eliminated the intelligent people that were leading in innovation and development and new business models and everything else. So they destroyed all of that. And in the next, from 17 through 38, 39, through all of the years, through war, through Stalin, they killed all smart people out there. The first spaceship that was sent from Soviet Union, that was from someone who the scientist who designed it was in Gulag, like he was in concentration camp.
Wow.
And all of this stuff, like how do you start this? You're having a highly capitalist society, and then all of a sudden you will take all the billionaires and distribute their wealth. Well, that's what will stop or slow down the progress. Jeff Bezos, he didn't steal from anybody. He made a company that it's now he's the richest, or who is today Elon Musk. Both people didn't steal it from anybody. So if you go and destroy those two people right now and distribute their wealth, well, where's the motivation? Where's the motivation to strive and to progress? And arguably, most people that are getting to that point, they're the most altruistic as well. Look at Bill
Hmm.
Gates. Like he decided then, with all his wealth, invest all of his wealth to, do things like eliminate polio in like multiple countries. So, I don't think that anybody will then, with having equal amount of wealth, chip in to do that together. I don't
Well,
think that people
yeah,
do
and if
that.
you look at somebody like Bezos, he's been villainized, and sure, he's got character flaws, and Amazon has done some messed up things. I'm not here to defend them. I'm simply pointing out they've actually made the quality of life better. The people that try and villainize him and say he's too wealthy are the same working class people who it costs them a significant amount of their paycheck to drive to the grocery store every single day and go pick up these things and put miles in their car. Now they can get things shipped to their house for free. It's actually improving their lives, and giving them expendable income. And on top of that, it's a slippery slope. So we've got the bill right now that is proposing, it's called the Billionaire Tax, but it's proposing them pay taxes on unrealized capital gains. I mean, how crazy is that? The name in and of itself, just they're unrealized. You have not realized them. And so we justify it slowly by saying, well, it's only for the billionaires. There's only 700 billionaires in the country. Well, that's where you start, right? And then what happens? Then it's people who have 100 million. And then all of a sudden you're villainizing everybody who's a millionaire. And a millionaire, I mean, they're printed, those are a dime a dozen these days. Like, they come out of nowhere. And so, like, you just get on the slippery slope when you try and start targeting and attacking other people. And, I read the Communist Manifesto. The whole premise of it was that under capitalism, the quality of life would continue to go down and wages would continue to go down because they had been for that brief period of history where he had been studying it, right? Now, if you take a step back and you look at it, those two things were so he got those things so wrong. I mean, it created competition, it drove wages up, and like the answer to getting out of the poverty cycle and to being able to provide enough affordable food for everybody is capitalism, because that's where you have innovation that is going to eventually solve like a lot of the problems that we currently have. We'll always have problems, but it's just insane to me that because people look at other people and what they have, and they try and blame it on race and whatever, and it's like they want to just tear it down so that we're equal, and it's like you're making life worse. And so, anyways, it's not directly related to what we are talking about, but it's indirectly related because the whole podcast is about, how can you do better? How can you scale? How can you utilize the tools that you have? And if those tools are taken away from you, then we're not going to be able to do these things that we love to do. So I really appreciate your perspective on that, having come from that. And,
Yeah, that was an unexpected question.
yeah,
And I'm trying to stay way far from politics, but that's just my experience. It's not even
of
political.
course. Yeah.
It's just
It's common sense.
what I've seen for the first 10 years of my life, and then what happened 10 years after. And then, what's happening now in that country. I think that Ukraine is improving significantly right now. But if you think about the billionaires there, those are the people that should be taken to court.
Hmm.
Most people there, they succeeded through the breakdown of the
Yeah.
system. They took the power, and then most of the people at power there are criminals. But
Yeah.
arguably, people will say that people here are criminals, but I just
Well,
don't don't think
it's a
so.
big difference when they're literally utilizing the law, like they're taking advantage of the law and breaking the law in order to gain like, yeah, it's a big difference when you have a high level of corruption in the government. So I agree, it's not apples to
Yeah.
apples comparison. But the point is, we got to fight. We have a great system here. We got to fight for it. And it allows us to do things like this podcast and consolidate veterinary companies and grow and scale and create opportunity for everybody that works for you. So I think we have a great thing here, and yeah, I want to do my little bit that I can to help protect it. But on that note, so yeah, so that was growing up for you, which is crazy. So you came over here in when you're 20, or I guess like you came over to Canada, and so like, I mean, as a kid when you're growing up, did you know that you wanted to be a vet? Like, what got you into that space?
So this is, this is the answer that the veterinary people probably wouldn't like, but this is not a veterinary podcast. But originally, I was just very interested in chemistry and biology, and when you have those interests in school, you're kind of thinking about where that could be applied. And I was fascinated with biology, and I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a human doctor. But we were extremely poor, and to get into a medical school, you needed a lot of money. So the veterinary was sort of a plan B because it still was related to medicine, biology, and things like that. But it's not, especially comparing the how non-lucrative the profession of veterinarian in Ukraine. All my friends were, cops, KGB, doctors, dentists, and then when I went to vet school, it wasn't cool.
Hmm.
It wasn't that attractive. So the part that interests me in veterinary medicine, and a lot of people are passionate about the pets, and that's why they love pets. I love pets, but I love the medicine aspect of it, and I like the investigation, and basically when you see the symptoms, figuring it out. That's what really drove me to medicine as it is, and veterinary was sort of the plan B because I didn't get into the med school.
Hmm. Hmm. That's yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a idea in their mind of what veterinarians are. It's like they're kind of like these animal loving, non-business savvy type people. But I think that we're seeing that's not the case because there's just so many vets that are doing really well and vet groups that are coming along and doing really, really well.
Well, the interesting thing there is that it's actually you're absolutely right because veterinarians by far most of them love animals. want to treat animals. There's other aspects of their characteristics because it's a very well selected group of people because they get through so many filters in their life to get to veterinary degree because it's so hard in North America. And in a lot of instances, so veterinary profession is the lowest in EQ. A lot of these people want to hide from people, so they think they will work with animals, which is not true because when you graduate as a veterinarian, that's all you do. You work with people, and they have pets. So that's a mistake. And then they are not very well educated on business. So when I went through vet school in Canada, because I did it twice, I did one in Ukraine and one in Canada. And then I realized how I don't know anything about veterinary business. I know how to treat pets. I know how to do surgery. I can remove spleen in 40 seconds, but I can't run the business. So it's not until the startup that I had in the software in veterinary domain and then the MBA that I think I'm somewhere closer to understanding business, but most veterinarians don't. And that's why the consolidation is actually an opportunity that private equity is taking on, consolidating veterinarians that don't know much about the business, optimizing the sort of back end of the business, the HR, the finance, the inventory management. But it's not veterinarians that own these companies, and that's what's happening to our industry, which is disturbing because for the most part it's being taken over by corporate America. And then, well, maybe corporate Australia, I shouldn't isolate America. So in a corporate world, without really taking care of people. And that's really what I'm focusing on right now, trying to build Galaxy
Okay.
Vets.
Yeah, and I want to talk more about that here soon, but I like getting to know the story, a little bit deeper level too. So, I guess you went to vet school, you graduated, you immediately opened your own, or did you go work for somebody else first?
No, I had an interesting path. So I was in my last year of vet school when we moved to Canada, and it was so basically I was just about to become a veterinarian, and then when we moved, none of that was recognized here, and I appreciate that. It's a different country, different regulations, different education. It was far more advanced at that point here. So the only job I could get after I moved to Canada, it was a janitor in the veterinary hospital. That's where I started, and I had to hold animals for procedures for 4 hours, and then to get a full-time job in Toronto for $8 an hour, I was also a janitor from 8 until
Wow,
midnight. So
that's
that's
cool. That's where you
that's where
built
I
your grit
started.
right there. You built your work ethic.
Yeah. So, but then I realized how more profitable and more respected profession of veterinarian through this experience in the vet hospital. So I started quickly trying to build up. I became a technician, which is an equivalent of the nurse in the human healthcare. And then at that time, I had a very good friend of mine who was also an immigrant but from Salvador, and he tried to write the local exam. I think at that point it was 6 times. I know now it's like 17 he tried and he still didn't pass. And he told me he was a colleague of mine and he said, "Don't try to pass the exam here. You're young, just go and study." And it was funny because I was young, I was just out of one school, and I was like, I don't want to study. And then he said, look, you're not going to have to clean kennels. You're not going to have to do everything you're doing now, clean the hospital after hours. You just need to read. That's all is required when you go
Hmm.
to school. You need to read and memorize. And that sort of stuck with
Hmm.
me for life because I'm continuously studying
Hmm.
all the time. Right now I'm in school again for the like fourth time
What are you
now.
studying now?
And I'm in Stanford doing lead program. So that's leadership and innovation, which is fantastic program. I just love it.
That's cool.
So it's very interesting. Yeah, it helps with leadership, and then we're also building products. So it's both aspects are very fascinating to me. But yeah, so he convinced me to apply to vet school, and I did not know how lucky I was because I didn't know how hard it is to get to vet school. It's actually almost impossible if you want to go to vet school. It's so competitive. There's 13 applicants per seat, and those are applicants with 85,
Wow.
average marks in their undergrad, and that are all undergrad for sort of pre-med quality courses. So it's really, really hard, but I got lucky and I got into Atlantic Vet College on PI. And so anyway, so I did my vet school second time there, but then I had this entrepreneurial bug, I think, from early on. And then right after I finished vet school, I wanted to be a radiologist. So I wanted to upgrade and become the guy who reads X-rays and CTs and MRIs. And then I ended up rapidly pivoting, and I went to Russia and built the first diagnostic lab in Russian Federation in 2007. So that was just a twist, which is not what we learned in vet school or in both vet schools, how to build a lab. But there was an opportunity, so I went and I did that. And then after that, there was sort of a year gig, learned a lot from it, was fired as a CEO. So that was a very interesting experience
What
that
happened that caused
also.
you to get fired, and did you learn anything as a result?
Yeah, I learned a lot. So, so there was an opportunity. So Moscow is a 14 million people population city that did not have a single veterinary lab. So
Wow.
it was a greenfield. It was an open opportunity. So, there's a lot of these things because after sort of the 90s, the capital and the power stabilized in the country, but there was a lot of people with a lot of money that had no idea how to invest or run the business because they were all criminals that basically, survived through the 10 years of chaos. And in the early 2000s, there was a lot of capital that people wanted to invest into different things. So Russia was very much progressing and, westernizing. It was a great time for business in Russia. A lot of companies, lots of Western companies, accessed that market. Everything was going well. And so I ended up going there for a couple of weeks experience learning how to do surgery and learned that there's no lab. And when I came back, I jokingly said that to head of lab in the vet school. And they said, "Do you want to build a lab?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I just moved from that region." And then in 20 minutes, I came back and I said, "Let's do it." So basically, I went with, just by myself and to establish myself in the capital of Russian Federation and build the first lab. It was a cool experience, but I was very young, arrogant, and very those two probably combined everything that I was. And I ended up building a lab. It was functional. It was the opportunity was there. Out of 75 hospitals in Moscow, I signed up. Sorry, out of 150 hospitals in Moscow, I signed up, I think 60% of them. Build a lab and sign them up to use the
Wow.
lab in the first year. But we didn't hit revenue to the degree where we wanted, and I was the most expensive employee because it was pretty cheap labor at that time in Moscow. So the decision of the co-founders, I was a co-founder, but I was the only guy on the ground actually building it. So there were five of us, and the decision of the board was that I should leave Russia, and because it's expensive, my paycheck was, which was average sort of doctor pay in Canada, and they decided that I should leave. And I knew that would be absolutely crazy to, because Russia is not easy to build business in. There's so much corruption. There's so much dishonest ways how people, treat each other. So at least I was somewhat from there and I could understand the local ethics or the lack thereof. And and I said, you will be immediately just turned around as soon as I leave. Someone is gonna just destroy your business. And while we were thinking about it, I offered that I could work for no pay in the lab, but I would run my veterinary mobile service. So I'm a veterinarian, so I wanted to stand up this sort of mobile service where vets would go to different locations. We stood up the website, and then they would just visit patients at home, and then they would bring samples back to the lab. So we would supply the lab with lab work as well as I would sustain my own income so I can continue building our mutual venture. And what happened is that I started doing that without aligning with the board and with the partners. So I started already doing it before they said yes. And there was someone in Russia who really wanted my position. They thought it would be open if I was fired. And they wrote which I never read that letter, but they wrote a letter to the board and to my partners and said that I started this veterinary clinic inside of the lab, which was not true. But basically, just kind of said that I'm doing everything against their decision, and the outcome was pretty dramatic. So I was sitting regular day in my office. This lab that I built, I had about a handful of people, 10 people working in it. And so I was talking to the president of the company, who was a co-founder, and he said, "Can you invite everybody into your office, put them on speakerphone, and that way, just in front of everybody I hired and trained, just said, Ivan is leaving the office right now. He's going to give you his keys, his laptop, his keys from his car. He's walking out, and you're changing the locks." And that's how they did it.
Wow.
So
In front of
it was
everybody, no warning, nothing.
no,
And
nothing.
I bet
No,
over
I
there,
actually cried.
you're not
Like
getting a
it
severance
was.
package, right? You're not getting 2 weeks pay or anything like that.
It was worse. I didn't have money to fly back to Canada where I had my wife. And one of my co-founders, who was a pathologist at the vet college, which I was graduating from, also stole my car. he was using it, and then he forfeited my signature on the ownership, and so I had a car. It was a terrible old minivan, but he stole it and he said, "Now it's mine." So I was coming, but I couldn't scrap enough money to actually get back across Atlantic.
Oh my
It was an
gosh.
interesting experience.
What did you do? How did you solve that?
So I came back, and I ended up suing them because you can't because I was
Hmm.
co-founder, so I had equity in
Okay.
this. So you can't fire a co-founder without, the decision, the board. Like it was just done very
This is a Russian
wrong from.
company or where is the headquarters?
No, it was
Canadian.
Canadian.
It's a
It
Canadian
was
company. Okay.
Canadian
So at
company
least you have
with,
some legal,
yeah,
yeah, some legal protection and like for yourself and a kind of somewhat non-corrupt, court system, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I ended up suing them, and we didn't get to court, but they cut a check, returned my car, and then I just, dropped everything, and it was in Atlantic Canada, so I drove across the entire country and started as an emergency vet in Vancouver.
So,
So
okay, did the amount of money that they settled with you for was it like a poke in the eye, or is it significant enough that it's like, okay, they would have taken me a while to earn this much money, and now I've got some startup capital to go do this thing? Like, where on the scale was it?
it was nowhere, but the fact that I didn't have even credit cards at that point, because in order to support people in Ukraine, I actually emptied all my personal credit cards to pay them salaries, which they never returned that either. So I was broke and in the negative with the student loans and with because I just graduated from school as well, right?
Oh my
So
gosh.
so I had no cash, no credit cards, student loans, and I had a very tiny check to actually that helped me to drive across Canada. And then I got a job as an emergency vet in Victoria, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island, and started
What
fresh.
was your
So.
mental state at that time? Like, what were your stress levels at?
Everybody's always saying, well, right now a lot of people could look at me and say I'm successful. And when you kind of tell stories like that, then people understand that it's not all straight line
Yeah.
up. And there's big divots going down, and then you're crawling up, and then you're going down, and you're crawling up. But if your overall trajectory is up from outside, everybody can say that, or you're a successful white man. And
You're the villain.
the,
Yeah,
it's,
you're a straight white male. You're
yeah,
the
in today's
worst
society,
person
I'm
in
the
society.
worst. So, but it was rough. I mean, I went through a significant depression,
Wow.
and I ended up, failing on all my loan payments, and it was a very deep hole for just, for a new grad from vet school to try to crawl out. So it was a significant depression. I burned out working as a veterinarian because I was clocking up to 120 hours a week trying to crawl out of it, which is three full-time jobs, if you'll understand it. So 120 hours a week, literally on the clock in. And
Are you getting
and
paid
then
overtime for this?
vets are not usually paid overtime. You're paid either commission or an hourly
Hmm.
rate. So you're not really paid
So you're
overtime.
just
But
yeah.
vets make decent money. But I burned out.
Wait,
So
120
actually,
hours
on top of
a week. That doesn't leave any time for sleeping, does it?
sometimes 1 or 2 hours in the car in the parking lot before going back into another shift.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So on top of everything, I ended up burning out to the degree where I couldn't actually work back in the hospital, and I needed professional help to actually try to step back into the exam room and be a veterinarian. So yeah, it was not a good state. Again, when I'm looking back, I can connect the dots. I can understand how that played a role in everything that I've done since then. But it was a couple tough lessons. And then the more I talked to entrepreneurs and people that succeeded in this life, they all had terrible experience,
Yeah.
one way or the other. It's not all straight line up. I don't know many people that were just, in a great family, then went to amazing school, and now they're billionaires. Like everybody had a bad time, and either they don't talk about it or like it's just not straight line up.
I agree. Yeah, life's hard. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're a billionaire or you're broke and on the streets. Like literally, we all have challenges that we face, and nobody has like an
Yeah.
easy life, regardless of what people say. And it's interesting to think about it from like the lens of your success in your career because tend to think, okay, like this thing happened, they screwed me over, they cost me a lot of money, it set me back. I would be much more advanced if that hadn't happened. But by the flip side, it's like, well, what things did you learn along the way? Like it sounds like you've come to the conclusion that because that happened early on, you actually learned a lot more that allowed you to scale your career and grow at a much faster rate than had it not happened.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I fancy myself thinking about a similar, I'm not Steve Jobs, but similar to his experience when he was fired as
Mm.
CEO.
Yeah.
And I think he learned a lot in that. Look at his comeback several years later. That's when the iPhone, the iPad, the Air MacBook, that's when all that stuff came out. Not that he wasn't smart before, but he had to be dipped quite underwater to actually come back and realize his potential, but in a different format. And that's what I thought, because all the arrogance was gone, all the pride and all of that was gone, and it was a grit to crawl out of that hole. I think that's the experience
Oh
that I
man.
went through.
So how did you transition? So you're working as an emergency vet, putting in 120 hours a week. Did you like how long were you there for? And did you start your own? Because right now, I mean, you're CEO of Galaxy Vets. You've got 2 podcasts that you host. Like, what happened in between then and now?
So I worked in emergency hospital, but also I started working as what's called locum or relief veterinarian. Usually, emergency hospitals would have a network of hospitals around that send cases, and a lot of the times they would need someone to do the relief work if someone takes vacation, sick, or something like that. So that is a way for because traditionally professional veterinarian, it's like I'm graduating, then I'm gonna work for someone, and then potentially I'll become an associate, and then maybe I'll step into ownership of the clinic. That's sort of the traditional before all this consolidation chaos. And I stepped outside of my comfort zone because I already had that entrepreneurial experience, and I thought I can work for myself doing this relief work. So basically, looking for practices that will provide me with additional work on top of emergency. So I've done that, but with that, I was exposed to multiple different clinics, workflows, cultures, and just seeing how things work and how things don't work. And at some point, I saw a very specific inefficiency in the workflow in the veterinary clinics, especially for the emergency hospitals. And I came up with this idea that I want to solve that. So I had this idea that I want to solve this manual analog process with technology. And I just started to looking for solutions, and
So
then
you weren't a
coincidentally, a friend,
technology guy. You weren't like a SaaS guy.
no,
Like, you just decided.
no, not even close. I'm a vet. Like this is why it was so scary to lose my license through burnout. That's what happened. For temporarily, I lost my life because I can't do anything else.
Hmm.
Like I can literally remove a spleen in 40 seconds when I'm in the abdomen, but I can't make coffee and and or flipping burgers. I'm sure I would learn, but it was so scary at that time. But what happened? I just wanted to solve a problem, so I didn't know technology, and it was funny, stupidest conversations I had with my co-founder of SmartFlow. So SmartFlow became that solution that we
Sorry,
built
what is it called?
together,
Smart what?
and it's a SmartFlow.
Smart flow. Okay.
So it was a workflow optimization system. And a friend of mine from high school from Ukraine reached out, and he was pitching me some idea about software. He's a software engineer. And then I told him, okay, that's cool, but can you solve this problem? And I haven't talked to the guy in like 10 years. And like I just told him what I envisioned this idea to be, and he said, we can build that. And the fact that I was not in technology at all, it was the conversations I had initially with him. I said, so can we have this on iPad and can it somehow talk to a website? And he was like, yes. And I said, can you build a website? And he said, yes. And he was very sort of reserved and patient guy. And I said, what did you study in school? Because I didn't even know what he did after high school. And he said, I was in, he was in coding. Like he went to engineering school, and he said that his specialty was building autopilots for spaceships. And I was like, okay, so you can build a website. So we ended up doing this. It was a classic startup. So he came to Toronto, and then we scrambled. I remember it was $6,000 together. That was our investment. And I lived in a small studio apartment in Toronto. He came. He lived in a little den on the air mattress, and for 6 to 9 months we lived together. He was coding. I worked in multiple clinics in Toronto, and I was bringing this prototype to all the clinics where I worked. annoying the hell out of them. But we developed a product, and it was an MVP that started to work. And then we started to learn, okay, well, we're out of money. Now, I was continuously working crazy hours so I can provide for both me and him. So we lived like a couple. And because he needed to write code. And then, so I needed to work more. And then I actually along the way got married. So I had to support also my wife with a newborn son in Moscow.
So your wife is living in
And then
Moscow at
at
the time.
that she was,
Oh
yeah,
wow,
because I was waiting for the papers to go through.
wow,
So and the newborn. So and I was flying every 20 days to or sort of a month to Moscow to visit her.
jeez,
And we ended up building this thing, but we started learning where do you take money? How people get money to build something. So we started to learn about angel networks, and then we learned about incubators, and then someone pointed us towards incubator in Toronto, and they took us on as a project, and we got an entrepreneur in residence who became my mentor, James Barola. He's an incredible individual. And then we got a grant through this incubator, and then eventually, that was also interesting. Things that I've done to raise capital for this. So one year I took all my taxes and basically put against the grant in the incubator, so we could do it because we needed a collateral, and I didn't pay taxes that year, being ready to go to jail for it. Like I was ready, and I didn't know what happens. I actually called my lawyer, not lawyer, accountant. I said, "You're not gonna like what I just did," and so I told him, and he was like, "Yeah, that's not very good." But apparently, they don't send you to jail for not paying taxes.
right? They just
They're
they'll
sending
penalize
you
you.
for tax aversion.
Yeah.
Yes. No, oh, well, yeah, you have a little penalty. And that was his answer. He said, well, yeah, I think it was like 30 grand or something. And he said, do you think that the return on investment is going to be more than 2.75% on this? And I said, why? He said, that's the penalty that the
Yeah,
government gives you. And I said,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's a
And
great
he
way to
said,
look at
well,
it.
then you just took a loan. Yeah. He said, then you just took a loan from government. I was like, okay. So but that's, yeah, we ended up growing that to 650 hospitals were using
Wow.
it. I ended up traveling around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, Europe, US, Canada, and we ended up selling it to one of the Fortune 500
Wow.
companies, where I became a general manager of software division with zero technical skills of engineering. I was running all the products in that company for a
How
short
many
period of
employees did
time.
you have under you?
Oh, I don't know. It was a big division. It was I think my direct reports were like, probably like five or so. But it was so there's 14 products, so therefore there's 14 dev teams, which was under the dev, but I ran the product. So I would think, I don't know, 100,
Wow.
maybe when you think about the entire infrastructure.
And
And it was 100 million P&L to report on.
what kind of
So it
multiple did
was
you get
it was
when you sold it?
16 revenue, which was
16
crazy.
of revenue?
Not profit, yeah.
Jeez. So yeah,
So
you're feeling pretty good. Did you take it as stock, like stock options from the company, or was most of it just cash?
now we got cash. We got jobs in there, so they put me as a general manager of their software division, and we were like those were just like stock option for employees, but it was a cash deal, with some holdbacks and stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, it was a
man.
cash deal.
So that had to be what did that feel like the day that you actually closed and sold it?
It's interesting, you would think that it's like a massive, celebration or something like that, but it was a conclusion of a very, very hard work. It wasn't a lottery. Like I wonder if, when people win the lottery feel differently, and I think they do, because it wasn't like it was a good feeling. I think that, when money transacted, I didn't even feel anything. When someone gives you an offer and it's great, then that's probably when you're like, okay, great. But you have to be sort of still because you're in that meeting, pretending that you're not as happy as you are. And but I didn't, it wasn't like, oh my God, my life changed right now, which it did. But I just felt like, okay, that was the next step in this journey because it was hard. It wasn't that easy. I mean, one day, so this co-founder, so he came to Canada. I stopped working as a veterinarian, and he didn't work anywhere because I had to pay for him. He moved in with his mom in Ukraine, and then I already brought my wife and my young son. He was two at the time, and we ran out of money. Our first investor promised us, three times more than he provided, and then And then, well, then he promised, and we didn't know it. We didn't read the contract, so he just was, I'm not interested in the next round, and I just hired 7 people. So again, by coincidence, someone in Australia said, we want to sell your product in Australia, and they flew me there. They paid for tickets, they paid for the entire trip, which was incredible. Someone paid for me to go to Australia, to go to Brisbane.
Someone paid for you
Um,
to sell them
uh,
products.
well, he was a distributor,
Okay.
so he wanted to sell my product in Australia. So he flew me out there. So it was Brisbane, it was Sydney, and Melbourne. So it was amazing. I mean, I love Australia. I love people there. But as I was leaving there, I had $700 total on both my personal and company accounts. So my wife, but I couldn't get back by myself if I wanted to from Australia because the ticket is way more than that. And then that $700 is all my wife had to have my co-founder living in my house with my son for that month. And if we ran out of money and I didn't find more money, like I don't even know what would happen.
Wow.
We would lose, like, so yeah. And then I flew to Australia and I brought back 150K that I got as an investment based on a handshake with that guy. So
Oh,
it
crazy.
was it's stressful stuff. It's not like,
Yeah.
well, again, everybody from outside would look at it, oh, you just build a company, you sold the company, you're rich. That's great. Yeah, it pretty much it sounds like that. It's not like that.
Well, yeah,
It's
it's high
very hard,
risk.
very
Yeah,
stressful.
it's high risk and it's high reward, and that's the trade-off, right? Like there's not linear growth in entrepreneurship. There's exponential growth, and so yeah,
No,
that's
no.
why.
And every step you make, I had a couple interviews and people are like, so what would you suggest, to do to kind of follow your journey? And I would say, well, do 2 educations in the profession that you're not going to do anymore. Like that's a stupid thing. Then, because I ended up in technology after 2 times, I was trying to be a veterinarian and did 2 vet schools. I'm not working as a vet. Then, having a newborn in another country, start a company with someone, then invest all your taxes at the end of the year into this without knowing if it will succeed or not. Like all of these things, they're highly no. Your parents would tell you definitely
Yeah.
don't do any of that. So all of these things is just, when you look back, okay, it's just sort of a coincidence or persistent or perseverance. I don't know what helped that, but it could very well go south. 95% of the startups fail. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
no, and I think it seems like successful people have a certain mindset that makes them successful. Now, the extent of their success largely relies on luck. Like, is Bill Gates, as the richest man in the world, is he 100 or 1,000 or a million times smarter than the next guy down? No, he's not. But he got a stroke of luck. But no matter what industry he was in, he would have been successful, just to different magnitude, right? So it sounds like you're going to be successful at something, and eventually, like, you were going to get lucky. And to the extent of that is kind of not within your control, but you keep doing the right things over and over again, and then eventually they pay out. And the end result is that you can live a great life, and you can be very, very happy if you don't compare yourself to other people. And yeah, it sounds like so far you've had, even though bad things have happened, a lot of really good things have happened, and it seems like you're setting yourself up for a lot more really good things to happen in the future.
Well, and I probably wouldn't fully agree with the luck itself. It looks like that, and for years and years, I kept saying I'm just so lucky that these things happen. But I think that there's a lot to 2 aspects of it. One is goal setting and having the dream, and another one is basically perseverance and continuing towards that goal. Because I think entrepreneurs are not great at succeeding. I think entrepreneurs are great at failing, getting up, and continuing.
Hmm.
And that's what it is. Because if a person who is not entrepreneurial sort of set of mind, A, they wouldn't risk things that people risk as entrepreneurs. B, when they risk and fail, they just quit. They're like, okay, that was stupid. I'm never going to do this again. I said I made stupid things over and over and over and over and over and over again until I had something what we call luck. Well, it's like you just keep doing things that eventually you will break through, you'll pivot along the way. We had different models for this software company as well. We wanted to monetize it through data. We wanted to do this and that. But eventually, if you have a goal, you go in towards it. And another thing that I call a sort of a red car symptom or syndrome, or I don't know what you call it, but when you're buying a red car, when you were thinking about buying a red car, and then when you bought a red car, you're driving around and everybody's driving a red
Yeah.
car. Wherever you look, it's like, what happened? Or you bought it, I don't know, Audi, and you're like, okay, it'll be cool to have an Audi car. And then you're driving around, it's like everybody's driving those. You're like, what happened? And that's actually a thing that happens in our mind when we set certain goals. So that's a goal. You wanted to buy an Audi. And then now when you're driving, everybody's driving it because your mind is picking out
Hmm.
things that are important to you. So I think that what we call luck is very much aligned when you have the dream, the vision, and the goal. Everybody you meet along the way, everything you hear along the way, everything you apply to your business model is a part of that vision because your mind picks out the important things from your surrounding. So it's not only luck, but there is certain degree of luck. I agree with that. But there's those two things. You're persistent and doing mistakes, and you're focusing on something long term, and everything that you see along the way, you will throw out things that are not important and those that will contribute to your success. You recognize them and add value to what you're
Yeah,
doing.
no, that makes sense. Yeah, that's a good clarification. I think, what I was trying to say is that not everybody can be a billionaire, right? But like everybody can have become very successful and is successful enough to live a really high quality of life and have a great life. There's the extent of luck that you get will determine whether or not you can reach that. Everybody focuses on a billionaire; it's just an arbitrary number, but the extent to which you can get close to that billionaire status. But like, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, which is you keep doing the right things, you set your goals on certain things, and eventually it will happen for you. Absolutely, it's just to the extent that that happens is variable. So yeah, I think we're definitely in agreement about that. And so, what year was this that you sold this company?
2019.
Oh wow, okay, recent. And so then, when did you start the podcast? And when did you start? When did you have the idea for Galaxy Vets?
So the podcast again, so I had some proceeds from the transaction, and then I thought that I can apply skills that I acquired throughout the experience. So I decided that I can help other startups, at least in the veterinary domain. So we created with a buddy of mine. He said, "Hey, do you want to start a podcast?" He had a startup. I'm an investor, angel investor in his startup. And I was pretty well known in the veterinary domain because of the software, because it's been in so many hospitals. And then he was also in the industry. And I said, okay, well, let's start a podcast. And it will be just a channel for me. It was a lead generation for angel investment. So we call it Veterinary Innovation Podcast. So we started talking about innovations and inviting entrepreneurs that have startups in veterinary domain. And then some of them became my investment because it was a good project. So instead of as an angel group looking for startups, we basically created our own channel of incoming leads for innovation. And that helped as a collateral marketing. Right now, there's actually, I think, like up to 70,000 listeners on it, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
And that's for our domain, it's very
Yeah,
good.
well, that's not like,
And
I mean, so that's vet specific, right?
yeah,
So,
for the domain, it's
wow.
huge. So that helped with everything else. And then along the way, I had another dream of trying to fight burnout in our domain, and that was my experience with burnout. So I tried, okay, so now that I can focus on something I want to focus on, and it was burnout. So I started thinking about it. I spent 3 years building a company, investing a lot of money with not much return on how to create management methodologies to fight burnout. And then eventually I realized, again, pivot. So I dumped a lot of money into building it. There's 35 people on payroll. We weren't making money. And then I said, if we can't teach others to run the company with burnout prevention in mind, let's build our own. And that's Galaxy Vets. So that's where our pivot. And we said, let's build our own company that will have burnout prevention in mind.
So let's I want to get into Galaxy Vets, but like, can you give us like a little bit of a history of the vet consolidation space? Because sounds like there is a little bit of a negative feeling towards private equity coming in and creating competition for vets. Like, are there that you see it in a lot of other industries that face consolidation, that the individual operators have a resistance to this. Like, what's been why is there resistance, and like what's been happening in that space over the last 10 or 20 years?
I think consolidation is great. I think that any industry that brings in professionals that can optimize the efficiency, the finance, the vendor management, it's all good because you're not only creating that, you're expanding the career ladder. So now people that were just nurses and vets, they can actually expand and go beyond that into management if they wanted to. It can drive innovation. Our industry is not supported by any sort of government subsidies because it's not, pharmaceutical companies maybe, but not to the degree as human medicine. So it's all sort of, cash operated businesses. So we can actually invest into innovation, into drug development if
Mm.
we're consolidating business businesses and creating a lot of capital. The negative side comes from the fact that a lot of money came into our domain, said, okay, this is a stabilizing business. Let's consolidate these clinics. But consolidation, there's two parts of thesis. One is arbitrage, when you're buying multiple companies with a certain EBITDA, and then you grow that EBITDA and then you resell. But most consolidators in our domain, they acquired multiple companies, they put them together, they're not from our domain, and then they said, okay, we don't know how to optimize workflow or efficiencies in the veterinary hospital, so let's just buy as many as we can and resell to the next guy. And that became a negative thing because they're promising one thing to veterinarian, then they realize how hard it is, and then their horizon of their capital is 3 to 5 years. And then they promise all these things, and then in 3 years they flip it to the bigger fish, and then they disappear. And then nothing what they promised veterinarians is happening, and that's the negative connotation. But now the clinics are all owned by corporate organizations that don't know how to run the veterinary hospitals, and it's not helping with the burnout that we have in the industry. And veterinarians are the 4 times more likely to commit suicide than general public.
Wow.
And yeah, oh yeah, it's a pretty bad
You know
problem.
what? I
And
heard a
right now,
statistic
45,
about that with
yeah,
dentists actually, and it was something to do with the fact that they were looking into the mirror when they're doing their operation, like they had to reverse the image in their mind, somehow created like this psychological effect that dramatically increased the rate of suicide. So does it have anything to do with that? Like, what do you think the reason is that it's so much higher?
well, that's an interesting comment that you made about looking in the mirror. I think that now everybody who is now working from home and Zoom should be much more suicidal then because we're all looking at ourselves. So
Yeah, well, 'cause
hopefully
it was
that's
like,
not the
but it was like
case.
the opposite. It was the fact that like they had to use that tool and they had to reverse their mechanical motions from their
Right.
thing.
I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know about that, but there's multiple factors in the veterinary domain. These people are very specific people, high stress, perfectionists, A players, and then they discontinue their lifetime goal when they graduate because they become a veterinarian. The goal is over. What's next?
Hmm.
So they're not setting their goals after that. The environment in which they work is not friendly. I was a veterinarian in emergency hospital. Nobody wants to see you as a vet. Everybody thinks that it's puppies and kittens, but you usually see very traumatized patients that in many cases you have to perform what's called economic euthanasia when the owner cannot afford saving their pet. Then you're the bad guy that ends up euthanizing the pet to discontinue the suffering. But it's you the one who could treat this animal, but you can't do that because the owner can't pay money. So you have this continuous dilemma in your head where you know how to save the animal, but you
Oh,
have to kill the animal while the owner hates you for doing that.
yeah, because it's not like with healthcare with humans where somebody steps up and pay, or you're forced to pay, or you're forced to do the thing, or eventually like you got Medicaid or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah. You don't just go and, euthanize someone's grandmother because they can't afford it. That
Right.
doesn't happen. So
Wow.
but that's what it is, and it's a high cognitive load, and being in emergency is terrible because every time whenever you see a pet in an emergency hospital, nobody wanted to see you today. It's not like, oh, I'm going to my hairdresser, or oh,
Yeah.
I'm going, to this, bakery to buy bread. It's like, I hate you. I don't want to see you. You're going to charge me a lot of money. I was sitting at home having a beer and my dog started vomiting. Now I'm in my slippers and PJs sitting in the exam room for 5 hours waiting for you to tell me what to do for $3,000. It's a pretty depressing situation. And when you finally save their dog, most likely because they fed it something inappropriate or something happened because of the owners, then they pay you the money and never want to see you again. That's not a very good relationship with your customers.
Right. Right. So yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So how did you come up with the idea for Galaxy Vets?
So we were trying to teach consolidators how to run an organization with people in mind. And we ended up building the consolidation framework, the whole framework of how to build consolidation in any domain. Dentistry, physiotherapy, veterinary, there's basically a methodology that helps through all the layers of organizations, connect the metrics, connect business processes, consolidate data. So we ended up building that whole framework, but with burnout prevention in mind. And none of our customers were actually interested in burnout prevention. And that was my original purpose to build that framework. So when we realized that we
So
can't
that
do
that was
that,
an
they're not
example of
in.
where your like the problems that happened to you gave you a lens of
There you
which
go.
to look through things for solve problems that you could solve proactively. So that's cool. It's funny that so we talked about early on, and now we're seeing it. That's an
Yeah.
example of how it manifested.
Yeah. So one of the most traumatic experiences in my life that almost ended my life, that burnout, now turned into building the company which will fight with that problem with for other veterinarians, so they're happier than I was. So
Hmm.
yeah.
So okay, and let's keep so that was kind of the motivation for it, and so and also like I know that it's from what we talked, it's completely doctor co-op, right? Like you will take on a little bit of private equity, but it's doctor owned and I guess initiated.
It's yeah, so basically it's simple. We're just allowing veterinarians to roll more equity into the parent organization than others do. And the outcome is very significant. That's why private equity is after our domain because there's so much upside. So now this upside, instead of us taking money from private equity and passing it to veterinarians, we're just using veterinarians' equity in their hospitals to build the organization so they can succeed. And then there's a little bit of institutional capital and they will succeed as well, but we're not taking as much as others to build this organization. But there's also another thing. There's ownership for all, and there's two theses. One, we allow rolling equity, so everybody who is selling their practice today, there's a lot of benefit if you want to continue working for about 5 years to do that with us rather than just sell and leave. And another one is we said, okay, well, how do you make people happy? Money. Everybody says money doesn't make people happy, but it's easier to be happy when you have money. So we said, okay, to have a mutual goal, and not only the one person who owns the hospital will succeed in transaction. Why don't we during transaction give equity in the parent organization to everybody in the hospital? And that's from doctors to nurses to receptionists, everybody. And right now it takes 10 months to find a veterinarian to work for you. It takes about $40,000 in recruiting fees, and 45% clinics in North America are looking for two vets, 1.8 vet, to be hired. And then in the last 6 months since we started it, we had 150 job applications at zero cost. Well, ad spend, that's it. So definitely, if you have the right purpose, people want to join you. And it's not about the market. It's about what's driving your business. How do you set the purpose? And do you have the purposeful leadership?
Hmm. So walk us through like an actual example, with some real numbers. Like what kind of vets do you, and I know you've already got 10 under LOI. You just started in August, which is amazing. So obviously your thesis has some validity to it because people are already
That's right.
interested in being acquired in a really, really competitive space. But like, I think it'll help people understand, what kind of like revenue ranges are you targeting, or can you just give like an example of, how that would actually walk us through how that would unfold?
So we talked to someone in Wyoming last night. So they have a great practice. There's two vets working in it, and then the rough number, let's call it a two doctor practice, would be around. I'm not telling their numbers because it's proprietary, but
Yeah.
the practice like that would generate somewhere around 2 million, plus some part timers, maybe 2.5 million. So with a 2 million practice and 20% EBITDA, that would be about 400 in EBITDA. If I'm
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
No, that's
About.
more than that. Yeah, 400. Yeah. So they can sell that practice today potentially at 15 multiple of EBITDA.
So a
And
15x is people are actually paying a 15x for a single practice.
right now, this is a crazy market. This is what's happening. A year ago, it was 10, maybe 12. This year, during COVID, there was 1,000 practices sold in US, and then the multiples went from 10 to 12 to like 15, 19. I've seen 23. Single vet hospital to a consolidator.
I can see that for groups, maybe it's still high. I mean, Apple was trading at 22, 23 times earnings on the public markets, like 19 times earnings. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple other reasons. There's a big company that's potentially going public, so they want to go public at a higher multiple, so they're competing with everybody right
Okay.
now. But that's yeah. So right now, if you're at 15 multiple on a hospital with 2 million revenue, you would get probably around 5 million for the
So that's
practice
almost a three
in
times
cash.
revenue. Multiple.
Yep, that's crazy. Yeah. So, but that's what you would get from the private equity. But get this. So if you'll take out about 1 million or 1.5 million as a mini liquidity event as a vet that owns that practice, and then reinvest the rest of the practice into our company, then 5 years later you could be anywhere between sort of 30 and 50 million.
Okay, so this company is worth about the enterprise value or the cash flow value. You would put it at 5 million. They can essentially take out. You said $2 million.
One and a
Okay, one and a
half,
half. So
one to one
essentially,
and a
they
half.
take out 1 million, 1.5 million. They take that money off the table, and for that safety net or whatever. Then they got $3.5 million of equity that they're rolling into the parent company, which you said can then turn into 30x or 30 million.
30 million.
So it'll be about a 10x of
30.
what they're rolling in.
So it's not necessarily like that. We're using it a little differently. We're giving them different valuation from what they're getting from the current companies, and then we're rolling the proceeds in a cash value towards our uh, today's share price, which is in the next round is about buck 50. So and then we want to exit at 24, anywhere between 24 and 40, depends how we execute on our thesis. So from buck 50 to 30, that's a pretty significant growth, and that's what private equity is getting when they're buying these hospitals. They're getting that multiple. So all we are doing right now is we're not retaining it as management. We're just saying, why would we take cash from private equity to do this transaction to make them rich if we can just take less money from private equity and make these guys successful as long as they want to continue working with us? Because we don't care who will benefit. It's not management. Management will get some along the way, but basically it's between those two entities, private equity and the hospital. So
So
why not roll the
yeah,
hospital and then,
you need the private equity money. You're using the private equity money to pay them out for whatever they want to take off the table, that 20,
yeah,
30%, and then the rest of it, they're re-rolling that into the parent
yeah,
company, which is set to grow. So,
exactly.
um, do you want to talk at all about the hub and spoke model? I know we're pretty much out of time here, so it's up to you.
I can mention a couple of things. It's an interesting thing because for in dentistry, physiotherapy, hub and spoke is very good model. And then in our industry, the shortage is because all the hubs were acquired. There's about 75% of big hospitals that are acquired. And when you have hub and spoke model truly utilizing all the potential, then you have a vertical integration in one location. So we're thinking about having our own lab. We're thinking about our surgical center where we'll transition all the surgeries from small hospitals into central, optimizing the economies of scale on those procedures. And then we have now more schedule open up in these smaller hospitals to do other things. So, and that's just sort of three, four things that I just mentioned, but then centralizing calls and doing a lot of things that you can do as a hub and spoke. So our goal is to find 10 plus partners in each area. Once we hit 10 in any geography, we'll drop and build the central hub. And then that hub and spoke model, essentially the plan is to build 20 of these hubs with hopefully 20 clinics and one central hospital. So it's a 220 hospital total when we're planning to go public at that point.
Okay, and I already know your real estate strategy, but explain your real estate strategy to everybody listening, because you guys are you're not buying, right? You're just looking at leasing. Oh, sorry about that.
So we're not thinking about buying right now because we want to focus our capital on acquisitions. But then partnering with someone who is buying real estate is interesting to us because we don't want to use capital for that right now, and our investors are interested more in the EBITDA growth,
Yeah.
not in real estate business.
Well, yeah,
So
real estate
that's why.
can take longer, you know.
Right. It's not a private equity, right? It's not a private equity game. It's a longer horizon, and then they're looking for 3 to 5 year term, and then private equity is a longer game. So
Yeah, I
that's
like
what
to
we
say real
have.
estate is a get rich slow scheme.
Yeah, there you go.
um, yeah, so essentially, yeah, not looking. So yeah, not looking to lease when they come like just acquire the operations, and then you know, looking for like partner like partner like us who comes in, buys the real estate, does a lease back for you guys if the
Yep.
doctor wants to sell, and then the one thing you will be doing though is the hub, right? Because that's going to be 20 to 25,000 square feet thereabouts.
Yeah, yeah, pretty big. They're a big facility, up to 30
Oh
actually.
wow,
Yeah,
okay.
we're gonna be building those. We're gonna be building those from the scratch. Well, hopefully not the building, but fit them into existing
Hmm.
leased buildings. And that's the difference. So the hospitals that we're acquiring or partnering with, we're not going to change them. We're not going to make them, wear McDonald's uniform. Like their legacy is their legacy. But the central facility is going to be brand new built with our identity, with our, colors and everything else. And it's going to be a sort of a shiny new building into which all of these vets will come in to do their surgery.
Okay.
So It's meant to solve a lot of social problems that we have right now. Well, not social, but basically problems with, let's say, young parents, veterinarians. Those burn out even faster. So we're thinking of having daycare actually on
Oh,
premise.
cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that we're envisioning just to help the industry with the burnout. There's a lot of little tactics that add on to a
So
big
will
strategy
it
of burnout
be like,
prevention.
will these be retail centers that people can like, customers can drive by, or patient clients can drive by, see it and like stop and see it there? Or is it more like, this is kind of like behind the scenes? They're going to more or less see the spokes around, and then their job, people from the spokes, is to, the job of the people, the clinics of those spokes is to bring in the patients and then maybe flow them into this hub, which,
So there will be several components in there. So the lab is not accessible to public. It's basic. Well, there will be a phlebotomy sort of room where instead of even bringing clients to the small clinic, we would just say, look, just go and submit the sample at the lab. So there's efficiencies at these little clinics. But so there's a lab serviced by the courier. Then there will be a specialty hospital where you can only send patients from these small spokes centrally to be seen by specialists. And then the surgeries will be done centrally as well, but owners will bring their pets on the day of surgery to drop off over there.
mhm.
And that's only, spays once in a lifetime. You don't castrate animals six times.
Yeah.
They will just go there once, and then and then you do that surgery, and they continue a relationship with their local vet, which is our spokes. But the ER will be in that central facility. So all of these spokes, when they are closed after hours or on the weekend, they will reroute the emergency cases. And during the day, if there's something very critical, they will refer centrally to this ER hospital. So that's the component that anybody can just stop by and visit. It will be ER and urgent care.
Okay. And so when you're vetting different vets, no pun intended, looking at different ones to acquire, and you're submitting LOIs, how important is the location to you? Like, obviously you have your set of metrics. Revenue, I'm sure, is one of them. But like, in terms of location, like, are you seeing, is there room for growth? Do they have room for expansion? Are these in prominent retail locations? Do they have good street visibility? Like, does any of those metrics cross over your desk?
They're important, and we spoke about you guys, how you do all of that stuff. So that's not our competency, but this is something we would love to start looking more at with your help. We are more focusing when we're acquiring them at the existing state of the business, the cultural fit, the ability to change, and the willingness to change post acquisition. And then if these are candidates for continuous growth and expansion, and we create all of those theses before acquisition, then definitely we're looking, can we expand? Can we, expand within that practice? So yeah, so all of those are relevant, but depending on the thesis of improvement, and which is not many corporates do right now. They're just, right now it's a market where they're buying anything that has a pulse.
Hmm.
We're very detailed in our thesis because we know how we can improve these practices, and if we can't improve it post acquisition, there's no point in acquiring it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, that's one of the things. Yeah, like we talked about. I think it's so important to try and get a good retail spot. I mean, you're seeing this in the dental consolidation space where it's like the guys who are doing really, really well early on, 20 years ago. They went out and they paid ridiculous rents for these big retail locations that were very convenient for the patients. They had great street visibility, and everybody at the time thought they were crazy. And now they're eating everybody's lunch. And so it's like, it seems scary and intimidating when you have to get a bigger building that costs you more money. But when you look at rent as a factor of your marketing, then it starts to make more sense, because it's like, okay, well, how much am I going to have to pay in digital marketing dollars to get this same exposure and to generate the same amount of new customers every single month, right? And when you break it down, like $10 a square foot can sound expensive and intimidating, when you're dealing with 1,000 or like a 3,000 square foot facility, and I mean $10 a square foot a year, right? But when you look at that cost, like how much does it actually cost you versus what generate the same opportunities of new patients, what would that cost you in digital ads, which are bidding platforms, which only go up over time, then it starts to make a lot more sense,
Right.
because your lease at
Exactly.
least is locked in.
Yep. Yep. No, absolutely.
Um,
That's why we contacted you.
yeah, I think these are just important things to talk about, that unless you talk about them, you don't know. It's not commonsensical. So you just, you have to learn by talking to people and having good conversations. So, what's
Yep.
on the future for you guys? What's your 5-year goals and or 10-year timeline?
Well, pretty straightforward. So we want to grow this company to 220 hospitals and go public. We hope that will happen somewhere between 5 and 7 years. But that's sort of the financial slash kind of, checkbox in my career goal to take the company public. But essentially, what I want to create is a scalable model that could be taken into any market, whether it's US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, or anywhere else, where you can build a hub and spoke, one unit, in which it's completely vertically integrated services with people that are happy. That's really the main goal, and we broke them down into deliverables in the next 5 years, and but that's where we want to get. That's happy people. That's the
Yeah.
main purpose.
That's cool. I mean, I have a 9 week old daughter, actually almost 10 weeks. And so, yeah, I totally,
Oh,
thanks,
congrats! That's
thanks.
so awesome.
Yeah. So, talking about daycare, like having this place where the vets can come drop off their kids, at the center spot, go to their work, come back. I mean, yeah, that's huge. It's hard to
Yeah,
find good daycare these days. So I think it's a great model all in all. And that's just an extra perk.
thank you.
Well, what's a place that
Yeah.
people can reach out and get in touch if they want to learn more?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good at answering. I think that's how we
Yeah.
met.
Yeah.
And if you can spell my last name, then you can find me. It's
Yeah.
Ivan
Yeah.
Zach
I'll
Aaron.
leave that in the show notes as well, because I'm not even going to
Yeah.
attempt to
And you
pronounce
can
it.
find
There we
galaxyvets.com.
go.
That's about our company.
Cool. Well, I will leave both those in the show notes. Yeah, so I'll link to both those so people can check it out. And yeah, exciting stuff. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for sharing your journey. This is actually, I mean, it's just a fascinating story to me personally, and so I hope other people find it fascinating. I mean, the amount of hardships and being from Ukraine and now where you're at, it's really inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was good. Thank you.